this tutorial on Flexbox, a powerful layout module in CSS that allows you to design complex and responsive layouts with ease. Flexbox provides a more efficient way to lay out, align, and distribute space among items in a container, even when their size is unknown or dynamic. So in today's tutorial, we are going to learn basic concepts of Flexbox, Flex container and Flex items, Flexbox properties and their usage, and we're also going to look at some real-world examples. So Flexbox layout, this is, as I said, this is a powerful layout tool in HTML and CSS, and this allows developers to create flexible, responsive, and dynamic layouts. Flexbox is also used to align and distribute items within a container. And the good or the advantage and the importance of it, it is actually supported by most of the browsers out here, be Google Chrome, Safari, and so many others like Mozilla Firefox and so on. So Flexbox layout is mainly made of the following: a flex container and flex items. What is a flex container? A flex container is a parent element that contains flex items. And flex items, these are children inside the flex container. You can imagine how it would look like before we actually get to write it in the codes. So we are also going to look at so many properties that are used with Flexbox layout, and we are going to mostly use most of them and see how they are displayed within a browser, or how they can align our items or flex items within our containers. And these are some of the Flexbox properties as well as this. And now let us dive into our VS Code so that we can start now using the properties and seeing how it would look in our browser. So you can head over to your terminal, and now you need to change your directory to your working space or your working directory. I'll just go ahead and go to my desktop, and then I will create a folder called Flexbox layout. So I'm going to be using this folder for coding anything related to Flexbox layout, and now I can also change the directory to the folder created, and I'll open it using code dot so that I can be able to visualize it in my VS Code. As you can see, it is opened. So I'll just go ahead and now create a file called index.html, and I also create another one called index.css. And now I'll just go ahead and have some boilerplate in my HTML by just doing an exclamation mark, as we have been using this for so long, and then I'll be able to get a basic structure of HTML. I'll just have to clean up some of the lines like the metadata, as I don't need them right now. I'll change my title to Flexbox layout. Let me first of all make sure that I link my CSS to my HTML using the link tag. I'll just go ahead and use this one with CSS, and now I will make sure that I reference my CSS correctly. My file for CSS is not called style.css, but rather index.css. Then after doing this, let me just try to minimize the size of my fonts. So after now referencing my CSS, I can now start writing some codes related to HTML within my body. So I'll just go ahead with a flex container and some flex items within my body so that we can see how they would look without some CSS. So I'll go ahead and just put in a div inside here, and this div is going to be the flex container. So I'll just give it a class of flex container, and then inside the flex container I'll put in some flex items. So these are also going to be in divs, and now let me duplicate these divs so that I can have at least 3 divs. And now I'll go ahead and put in some content like item 1, then item 2, then item 3. So now I can give them also a class of flex item. I want them to have the same class, so I'll just copy this and paste it within the other flex items. And now, after doing that, let us just open this within our browser so that we can see how it is looking without some CSS. So I'll just click go live. Yes, as you can see, this is how it is going to look without any CSS applied to it. So now let me try to put in now some CSS so that we can change the look. So we can test that our file of HTML is actually linked to our CSS by just doing the body and giving it a background color of red, or let's do black. And we see, so we can see now our background change to black, and if we also change the color to white, we can see that our color of the items within the body have turned to white. So now let us start now writing some CSS related to our Flexbox container so that we can see now how they will look like. Alright, I'll just delete this, and now I can go ahead and now start styling my HTML page. So as we've been learning in different other sessions, so we'll make sure that we use classes as we have our class as our CSS selectors. So if we have CSS selectors of classes, then we'll need to put there a dot, and now we can just write our class. So I'll just collapse this, and then I can just bring this aside like this so that we can write our CSS as we are also visualizing our HTML. So I'll just go ahead and copy the key, the keyword for our class for the flex container. And now if we have a flex container, this means that this is where we're going to start with making sure that our items can be aligned in whatever way we want. So we do this by first of all making sure that the flex container is given a display of flex. So this is our first step to make sure that we have flex items within our container. As I explained, you can only have such behaviors if you define your flex container, or if you set your flex container with a display of flex or inline flex. You can as well do inline flex instead of flex. And now your flex items will now have a flexible alignment. We can now visualize this and we can see how it is going to look. So by default, it will align your items in a flex direction of row. But again, you can always specify your flex direction to become column if you need to display your items in a column way. But right now we just need to display them in a row, and we can just leave it without the flex direction, since by default the items will display in a row direction. So now, after now visualizing how our containers items will look like when we just put there a display as flex, now let us try to put there a background color of gray. So we're just going to put there a background color of gray. So our background is going to be light gray. And now we can go ahead and also put there some padding inside our flex container, and we can have at least a padding of 10 pixels. This should be enough. And after putting there padding of 10 pixels, this is how now our code is going to look like, or our page is going to look like. And now let us try and style also the flex items. So remember the flex items, these are items inside our flex container. And now since we're using class selectors, we're going to put there a dot, and then we can just put there our curly braces. So mind you guys, when we're styling, you can identify your styles with either a tag, the same way we had used the body, and you can also identify your class selectors by just using a class, by just applying there a dot, and make sure you write your class name there. You can also use IDs to identify your classes or to put some styles to your ID elements or elements identified by the ID. Then you will need to come into your CSS and you will need to show the ID selector with a hashtag, and you write the keyword. So after writing the keyword, then you will need to specify, you will need to put there your curly braces, and inside the curly braces, this is where you're going to write your style. So you can also use other many selectors to actually write your styles, but the main ones used are the tag selector, the class selector, and the ID selector. And you can as well do the grouping selectors, whereby you can use more than one type. So now let us continue with our styling. Let us just have a background color inside here, and we're going to have a background color of let us just have a background color of Doja Blue. It should be enough to actually look great. So now we can also have if we put there a background color of blue, you can see how it looks, but it's still close to each other. Let us put in a padding of now 20 pixels between the items, and now we can as well have a margin between the items so that we can clearly see how they will be separated, and be able to visualize them within the browser very well. They can also change the color of the items or the content to be white, since our background now is blue. So if we come and see how this will look, now you can see it is looking beautiful, and we have our background color as blue, and we can also see the items inside because they are white. So please make sure you understand all of this, and the way the styles are written, this is called a CSS property, and this is its value. So we have a CSS property of background color, we have here a CSS property of padding, and then margin, and then the color which only applies to text. So now let us now continue with our styling and explaining also different things within what we have just written and what is displaying in our HTML, I mean in our browser. So now let me explain step by step everything we have in our CSS. So on the second line, first of all, on the first line we have the class name with a dot because we're using a class identifier or a class CSS selector. So now inside the flex container we have a style of display flex. So this display flex is our first step to making sure that we are using Flexbox so that our items can display with a flex. So you need to make sure that you always display your flex container in flex, and your children will become flex items immediately. So we can as well, as I said, have a flex direction inside here, but by default when you do display as flex, by default it will have a flex direction of row. So there are two values of flex direction property. There is row and as well column. So let me try to write it and you see how it would look like. So flex direction, this is the property. It is row, and when you put row here, nothing will change exactly. But when we change this to become column, as you can see, this is now going to change and it will be displayed in columns, and the children will occupy the whole width of the space provided. But let us just leave it as row since this is what we want. So now there is also another property called flex wrap, which is also applied to the flex. If we give it a flex wrap and give it a value of wrap, of no wrap, it means that if we give it a value of no wrap, it means that there is nothing going to happen within our browser, because we won't be wrapping our items in case our screen is decreased. But if you give it a value of wrap, then it means our items will wrap when the screen is decreased. Right now we only have a few items, we can't actually visualize that. But if we change the items with this and maybe increase it to a certain size, I forgot a semicolon here. Every CSS property is separated by a semicolon. If I give it like 200 pixels, and now my items will be bigger. So if I try to decrease this, you can see they are wrapping. Can you see that? It is because of the flex wrap value. And if we give it a wrap of a flex wrap of wrap reverse, it means now they are going to wrap, but in a reverse way. You can see it just now started with item 3 instead of item 1. So that is how flex wrap works. So I'll just continue with a wrap instead of wrap reverse. Our next property now is justify content. So justify content is also applied to the flex container. So this is how it is written, and it has values of either baseline, center, end, or you can also write flex end instead of end, or flex start instead of start. And you can as well also have this space around, space between, and all of that can be used on the flex content. And now let us try to do it in practice and see how it would look like. Right now our items are by default in the start justification, so they are like this. So if we do justify content end, now they will be aligned at the end of our flex container. But if we just put their center, now they will be aligned in the middle of our flex container. So that is how justify content works. So you can as well also do justify between, a space between. This is how space between will look like. It will apply space between the items, that is equally. You can also do space around, which will look different from the space between, because it will also apply a space on the left and the right of the items. So let me just go ahead and continue with start as the default. And now let us go on to the next property, which is align content. It is also written like this. It is also applied to our flex container. So align content also has almost the same thing, like start, end, between, center, space between, and so on. So what it does, this property aligns multiple lines of items along the cross axis when there is extra space in the container. Now let us start with start. If we put there start, you can see nothing will change because that is the default. But if we put there like center, you can now see also nothing is changing. The reason as to why nothing is changing, it is because our height is very small to the extent we can't see the changes. So we'll need now to enforce a certain height on our flex container. Let us give it a height of maybe 400 pixels. If we give it a height of 400 pixels, then we shall be able to visualize our items change. Let us start with start. So if we start with our start, you can see our items are aligned at the top. And if now we go on with the center, you can see our items are now aligned in the center. They are actually following the cross axis or the y axis. If we do end, they will be aligned below, as you can see. But let us keep it as center for now. All right, that is another property that applies on the Flex container. So our next property is related to our Flex items here. So the first property is the order. So you can always change the order of these items in case you want by just using the order property. And right now, let us make sure that we target an item, or let us just target the first item and give it an order of 2. So to target the first item, we do not need to provide it another class, but we can rather do we can use our class of flex item, and we can now apply there a pseudo of first child of nth of we can actually do first child if we are specifying our first child, and we already know our first child is this one. But as well, you can also use variables by doing nth child instead of first child. So for the first child, it will now go straight to this first child, and now we can change its order to become 2. You will see now that the item 1 was moved to an order of 2. So, and we can also move it to the order of 1. It also applies to our flex items. Is a property called flex grow. So to show you how flex grow works, let me just remove this width, and now I'll just go ahead and just write flex grow, and now put there a 1. And if you look, when I put there a 1, they are actually now being given an equal width by just using our flex grow. But we can again change this by making sure that we say maybe our first item is going to have a flex grow of 1, and now we can say our second item will now have so we do not have a second child uh, uh, property or pseudo property, but instead we can just choose to use nth child, and then we can specify this is the first one, and we can also here use nth child and specify this is the second one, and we can give it a flex grow of 2, and then the third one can also be given a flex grow of 1. So you will notice the difference. You will see that the second item will be now twice bigger than the first and the second. You can see this. It is twice bigger than the first and the second because we gave it a flex grow of 2, and the others were given a flex grow of 1, which means it is count this as ratios. So if we give it a flex grow of 2, it means it's going to be 2 times bigger than the ones with a flex grow of 1. So now let us continue with another property of called align self. So align self, this is a property that allows individual flex items to override the align items property. So you can always override the align items property and within from the items or from the flex items themselves. So if we come here and we go to our flex item and we put there align self, let us apply it maybe to the first true child. And so if we put our align self as the start, and we come and do align items, which acts almost the same as the align content, and we do our align items center, they are aligned actually in the center, and now we can use align self on the first child and be able to override the default behavior or the behavior we already gave our items when we did align items. So they should be in the center, but we can override the behavior by just making sure we use align self on a certain specific item if we want. So as you can see, this one appears to be at the start. We can even have item 3 appear to be at the end by just using align self on the third item, but instead of start we can do end, and you can see now it will be at the end. So now that is how normally it is used. And now let us look at a real example or a real world example of how we can use Flexbox. I'll just go ahead and do another file here, and I'm going to call it navigation.html. Navigation.html, and I'll name it CSS as navigation.css like this. Now I would go to my HTML and put in a boilerplate, and now I'll just put here navigation, and then I'll need to link my CSS to my HTML by just doing this, and now I will rename this as navigation. So now my CSS is now linked to my HTML. I'll just stop this and go live to make sure that I have opened the right HTML document. So now I can just put in a body selector or a tag selector to make sure that it is linked to my CSS, and you can see the background changed to black. So now let me now start writing some HTML that are related to what I'm going to be showing you as a real world example. So we are going to be doing a navigation bar or a nav bar, so that we can see how we can use Flexbox by just building our nav bar. So I'll just start with an element called nav. This is an element which mostly will specify that this is a navigation bar. So, and these are what we call semantic elements. So inside we'll put in a div, and this div will contain maybe a logo, even though we don't have an image right now, but we can just say my site as the logo. And now I'll go ahead and also put in an unordered list, which is going to contain a list of some of the navigation items. Let me have in some navigation items around 4, and inside the list I'll have in anchor tags so that I'll be able to link my navigation items. This anchor tag, they won't link to anything as of now. I'll just leave it like this, but if you want you can link them to something. So I'll call this one home, and now I'll copy this one and move it also here, and do the same thing here, and as well do the same thing here. No, I just misplaced it. I'll cut it and bring it inside here. So this is now how it is going to look, and now I can start applying there my classes. So for the nav, which is the flex container, I'll just give it a class of navbar. You don't have to call it always flex container, but just know that the parent should be the flex container, but you can give it a different class. So for the logo, I'll just name it as logo. I'll give it a class of logo. And for the unordered list, I'll just give it a class of nav links like this. And now for the rest of the other items, I won't give them classes. In case I want to style them, I'll be using tags and so on. So now let us start by just making sure that our flex container is in a display of flex, because this is what is being considered as our flex container. So now we'll just go ahead and do a dot and navbar. So because we use classes, That is why we need to use a dot, and then the class name, then the curly braces, and we put in our styles. So we are going to make sure that this is displayed as flex. And now if we just do display as flex, you can see how it looks. And now we just go ahead and also justify our content with a space between, so that they can just go side by side. So this is what space between does. And you can see our elements, our items are not actually vertically aligned. And we can also do that by align items center. You will see now they are aligned vertically in the center. We can as well put there some padding, which will make it more look with a more good look, like top and bottom 10 pixels and left and right 20 pixels. So for the padding, if we write it in this format, this means that the first value is for the top and bottom, and the last one is for the left and right. So we can also give it a background color of dark gray, which is like this. And now we can as well give it a color of white so that it is visible. You can see these ones, the color of white won't be applicable to them because they are in anchor tags, and anchor tags has their own behaviors of colors when it comes to links. So now let us also style our logo. For the logo, we're just going to give it a font size of maybe 24 pixels so that it appears big, and also a font weight of bolder so that it looks like it simulates a logo, but usually you always have an image there. So, and now you can see how it would look like. It is bigger. So now we can also make sure that these nav links are also in a flex display by just putting there the class nav links. This is the class, and this is also being considered as a flex container, and these inside items are considered as flex items. And now I just go ahead and give it a display of flex. And if I just give them a display of flex, you can see how they will look like. Now they'll be aligned on the same line. So after giving it a display of flex, and now we can also remove those dots by just using list style, which will remove the dots on the anchor tags. On the list, because those are an ordered list and usually they have bullets, and whereas the ordered list have numbers. So now after removing that, we can as well go ahead and style the links inside the nav links, these ones. And we can do that by specifying the class and making sure that we want to style these links inside this item with a class of nav link. Otherwise we will be targeting all the links, all the lists in our page, but we just want to target the list in the unordered list of nav links as its class. So now we'll target them with a margin. We style them with a margin left so that we can get some spacing between these. We'll style them with a margin left, and we can do a margin left of 20 pixels. Let us do 20 pixels. The same way you can do margin, which applies to both top, bottom, left, and right. You can also just specify margin left, margin right, margin top, and margin bottom, and only give that a value. You can see some space was applied, and we can as well make sure that we style the anchor tags inside the nav links container, and we can give them a color of white so that they look white. And we can also remove these underlines by using a property called text decoration, which can have a value of none, and you can see they were removed. And we can also put there some padding to make it look more beautiful, like 5 pixels on the top and bottom, and left and right 10 pixel. You can see how it looks more beautiful. We can as well also put there some hover effects by using pseudo of hover on the anchor tags, but that when we hover on it or when we hover on a nav links, we get a background color of light gray, and then we can also have a border radius which is going to curve our which is going to give it a curve of at least 5 pixels. You can see when we hover, this background has a curve of 5 pixels. It looks more beautiful now. So this is Flexbox in action. You can see how it looks more beautiful by just leveraging Flexbox layout. So now, please, we were just doing this to make sure that we have a navbar which is in Flex, and making sure that we have utilized most of the properties of Flexbox. So as a conclusion, Flexbox is a powerful tool for creating flexible and responsive layouts in CSS. It simplifies many tasks that were previously challenging with a traditional layouts method. So by mastering Flexbox, you'll be able to design a modern, adaptable, and visually appealing website with just using most of its properties. So some of the tips that I would give you are like experiment with different Flexbox properties to understand how they affect layout. You can play around with those properties, all the properties that we saw, and see how it will work out and see how it would look like. That is how you're going to end up now knowing what different properties do and what purpose they would serve. Also combine Flexbox with other CSS techniques to create complex layout and beautiful layout. And plus remember that Flexbox is best for one-dimensional layout, that is to say row or column. For two-dimensional layouts, consider using other CSS layouts like grids. We shall come to that later on. So thank you for watching, and if you found this tutorial helpful, please make sure that you share your colleague and inspire them to learn more from this video and to learn more about Flexbox. Thanks everyone, see you next time.